My name's Loski, and I'll be talking to you about managing ETL change using BIMLScript. My intention is to show how you can work with a metadata file to generate fixed width SSIS packages that will handle a fixed width file, which can be kind of a challenge, and we'll look at that challenge in a minute. Just the reminder you see all the time, make sure you have your cell phone silenced, and also this is not the only event that Parse has. There are all kinds of things. SQL Saturday, there's one in Seattle, or Redmond coming up in April, and there's one almost pretty well all over the world. You can find a SQL Saturday, and various online groups if you're interested. I'll put this up at the end, but make sure you put in the session evaluation. I mean, who doesn't want to have a chance to win more swag, right? Okay, there's if you entered there, if you enter an evaluation, that will be added to your chances of winning the prize. Okay, so a little bit about me. I'm a grandfather, father, husband from the Fort Worth area. My granddaughter's having her 9th birthday this weekend, so we're looking forward to having all the kids together. I'm a SQL Server developer. I've been working with SQL Server for 20 years. Lately, I've been working, I think the last 10 years, heavily with SSIS. I'm heavily involved with the North Texas SQL Server user group. We're a very large group of SQL Server professionals in that area and speak at several SQL Saturday events. Currently, I'm working for RDX, which is a remote database organization. I'm a data analytics engineer, which means I work with BI work. So we're going to talk a little bit, I'll illustrate the problem of changing data, and then look at how I'll demonstrate how we can use metadata to generate the packages to work with that data, generating SSIS packages. And then toward the end, I'll just give you a glimpse of a way to use Azure Data Factory, again, using a metadata file to process the fixed width files. These are kind of my goals. I'm not so much wanting to teach you a lot about BIMLScript. There'll be a few points. It's more to pique your interest in what you can do with BIML and BIMLScript so that you can take it back and maybe learn something. How many have heard of BIML, BI Markup Language? Okay. That's a lot more than I was expecting, but that's fine. That's fine. Okay. So this started as a problem. I was working for a healthcare organization, and we were getting data from various payers, insurance companies, and our big one was, of course, Medicare. They had a program called Medicare Shared Savings Program, and they provided a large amount of data with the goal that we would reduce the cost and improve the health. And they provided it in 10 different files. They're all fixed width files. These files had about, some had 20, some had 30. They had up to 50 columns in them, okay? And you can imagine, how many have worked with SSIS and fixed width files? Okay. I don't find it fun, so I've avoided it. And so you end up with an interface that looks like this. You're clicking around, you select the columns. This isn't the Medicare file, this is a different one, but you're clicking around, getting things lined up. If you mess up, you end up having to, sometimes I found I had to restart, just cancel, restart, go on and edit. It's a challenge. And you end up going in a circle. You're looking at the interface, looking at the file, looking at the the structure, it's enough to make you dizzy trying to get that to work. Then something comes along to change it. Of course, every year things change. There was a law passed in 2015 called MACRA that did several things. The one that's kind of a small part, but it's important for us, was it changed how the Medicare ID is handled. The Medicare ID used to look something like this. Okay, it's a bunch of digits with number. Maybe if you look at it this way, it looks a little more familiar. It's just your Social Security number. And the Congress came out and said, no, we don't want to have Social Security numbers on everybody's card. I think it's a great idea. The problem is, now we have to incorporate that into all of those files. And what they did, which I don't see how they could do it otherwise, they had to add a new column for the new ID. So you've got the new ID, the old ID, and then it meant you had to go back in and edit all of the files again. And my thought was, why not start with something that was more of a metadata format and generate the files? Okay. Now the problem is obviously I can't bring, even if I were still working for this organization, I can't bring Medicare files out. I couldn't find samples, so I found a different one that makes Medicare look like a piece of cake. It's called the Census for Population Survey. It's a Bureau of Labor Statistics, and they do surveys every month, and they produce a set of files. The beauty for my purposes is that these files have been out there since 1994, and they are fixed width. They've got anywhere from 850 characters in a line to 1,000. They have maybe 350 to 400 columns. It's a beauty and a mess. But then to make it even more interesting, it's about every 2 years they change the format. Now, for some reason, I haven't figured out what they're doing. They haven't changed the format since January of 2017. So I think we're due for another change. So anyway, I thought I'd look at that. This is an example of the file. And you can imagine clicking around 300 times to try to get this lined up. And obviously, trying to get it exactly is a mess. Okay. But the thing is, they provide a fairly nice data dictionary. This is the format. So if I can take this, put it into an Excel file, something along the lines of this, or I put it into, say, a SQL table, some kind of a tabular format, I could then use that to generate my SSIS package, and that's what I've done here. By the way, going from here to here, I could use different methods, either programmatic or maybe assign this to a more junior member of the team, or it could be even just a business analyst. It doesn't need to be a technologist. The big benefit, side benefit of this is now I've begun to document what the columns are. So I'm beginning to provide information that the business users can use. How many have found themselves in the role that they are the expert on the data, and you're just answering questions all the time? Where does this column come from? Yeah, I had one place I figured out that it seemed like in my half year or year in that contract, I was probably two weeks of that time probably was answering, this column comes from here, this column comes, and it'd be nice to have been able to hand that to them. Okay, so the process I'm using, we have on one side, we have the metadata. On the other side, we have the SSIS package. And what I'll use is BIML to generate the SSIS package, and to create the BIML from the metadata, I'll use BIMLScript. And so I'll show you that process. By the way, I'll have these slides. I have a version of them. I'll put the revised one, I hope by today I'll have them out. It may be a week before they're finalized. They need to be approved. Okay, so I'm going to demonstrate the process. I call it my magic show. It's kind of two phases. First, I'll show you the magic, and then we'll go behind the scenes to look at how the magic is done. So, any questions before I go forward? Okay. So let's go over to my project. And this is the BIML that I built. And let me just, if you've worked with this is using the free tool, which is called BIMLScript. And you see at the top there's a menu item called BIMLScript. If you do a search for BIMLScript download, that will bring up. It's an add-on that you can add on to Visual Studio to work with your SSIS package. Okay. This is one of a series of free tools that have come out. One of the things it does here is that you've got two sections. You've got this top section is basically the source, and then down below you have kind of the output to that. And just so that I can save some space, I'll hide that. Okay. So I've created a set of files. For those of you who have worked with BIML a lot, you recognize what I'm doing. I will talk through it. What I've done here is put in, I have a series of variables, and I was cutting and pasting, and it was taking a long time, so I put them into a file. So these are all the things for working with what I call the original, which is going to take the metadata from this worksheet and use it to parse a file. And I call it original because this is close to what happened when I programmatically generated this file. I extracted every line and put it in. I made a little bit of a change, because I had duplicate columns, just because it would automatically error out. And then what I can do, so I have this built. I right-click on the file, and it gives me a menu. This menu, again, this is part of BIMLScript, the top two items. I can either check my BIML and make sure that it's valid, or I can generate an SSIS package. And I'm going to generate the SSIS package. And now the output is showing it's completed. It took a little longer the first time I ran this today, so I think it's, if it takes a little bit, maybe a minute or so, then just wait. The next time I run it, it runs faster. It created this package. And the package is going to do, it has three things. It has the source file. So that's my source connection. That's my target connection, which is a CSV. And then it creates a data flow for transforming it. So let's look at each of those. And we'll start with the source. And you see our you can see what the familiar interface right there. And what you can see right now is a lot of mess. So some of the things that you can see right away, that little character, any idea what that character is representing? Say again? Okay, so yeah, thank you. That was the carriage return. It's one of the things that I always forget about fixed width file format is it's fixed width. It's going to include the carriage return as data, and you can see that that carriage return is right in the middle. That should be at the end of the line. And you can see it should be nice and lined up. You would expect to find the same thing here. You look at the beginning, you would expect to find consistent. Now what happened after that is I went in, I I've taken it out, but fairly simple with this format. I just took the length and added it to the start position and compared it to the following line. So if if you take this, that 15 plus 1 should equal 16. And every time I found a case where it was different, I just went in and edited the file. I went and looked at the source document. I think it took me about a half an hour to put this together, to go in and figure out what was wrong. And then I just reran this process. Now, if I'd been doing this with the standard SSIS tools, I would have had to have gone in and edited it, and it's almost a guarantee that I was going to screw it up. Usually a start and a restart. Okay, so that one was wrong. This is my out file. I've created a delimited, and I put this together mainly because I wanted to show the full life cycle. And I'm driving that from this column right over here. Somehow, the only piece that I'm missing, I need to figure out how to represent that this is a delimited versus a non, and that's a little bit beyond what I've done here. I've just hard-coded that. Okay, so I have this. Because I've run this in the past, you can see I have data already. Okay, and then finally, I put the data flow together. And one of the things that I've decided to do was to restrict the columns. When I was working with a colleague who had a file that was just this long, it had all kinds of columns in it. And I thought, wouldn't it be nice to be able to get rid of all of these columns that I don't need? I think in debug mode, sometimes they take up memory, even if you're not using them. So I just figured out how to get rid of those. So everything's, rather than going through and checking them and unchecking them, so it's a lot nicer. So any questions about what I've done so far? Okay, so now I'm going to make a small change to this and add this to, I'll use this, and I will show you all of these in just a moment. So then I right-click and generate the SSIS package, and it should be fairly fast. Okay, so there's this, and we'll just look at this. And now that's already looking good, better. The beginning's looking good. I'm not going to the end because I always have trouble finding the end because this is not, again, it's not the best interface. But at the end, you'll find all of the carriage returns are lined up. Now, what I'm going to do, I almost think this is what would normally happen in a shop. You have this. Normally, you would have this package looking in the folder. Anytime there's a new file that matches the pattern, it reruns it. And I think what'll frequently happen, I'll create a new version of this, is suddenly it is January 2017. So we call it Jan 2017 old format. Okay, so I'll change this. And I think I've made this one mistake so many times. See that text? You have to, because I'm using a DAT file, I always have to remember to do this. I get all kinds of interesting things. Okay. So let's look at the format. Did I? Nope. Oh wait, okay. About half the time when I hit OK, it comes back and says the metadata changed, and it gives me a warning. So you get a call. Sometimes it's you find out about it at 6 in the morning. They've changed the file, or it could be that when they start running the reports, they start saying, "Wait a minute, nothing looks right. Our counts are off, etc." And now, what do you do to fix that? And what you can do then is go back, and I go back, get the new format, and again, I've learned my lesson. I've learned that the data is going to be messed up. It's not going to be pulled in. So I go in, fix it up, and create a new layout. Take and learn some of the lessons from the previous run. And it took me, again, about, I think it was maybe at half an hour, 45 minutes to prepare this file. And then I rerun it. Okay, so we go back to our build the flat file. And I put this in. This will generate the package that I created by cutting and pasting. So I paste this here and try to rerun it again. So, I always have trouble with this. Oh, I'm in the wrong place. Okay. So I'll rerun for a second. So, and now this should be the correct value. We check our columns, and they look like they're, at least here they look lined up. And we come over here, and they're lined up again. So, okay. Any questions about this before I go into what's behind this? Okay. Let me just run this just so that you can see that it, hopefully it works. Okay, and so it's pulling in all of the rows, 150,000 rows. Okay. So, oops. Stop that. So let's go look at, so most of you have worked with BIML. I'm going to look, I won't start at the beginning. I'll start with the package that's generated for this. Let's see if I find this. It's a flat file stat. I called it flat file static. I'll hide the preview. And this would be BIML. This is the markup language. And at the top, I have too many windows open, sorry. Okay, so we have, these are the comments that I put into my file. You can ignore those. But you see at the top, we've got our root node, which is BIML, and it's case sensitive. It's BIML, that's BI markup language. BIML was started, I think created about 10 years ago by Microsoft, kind of the roots of it. And Scott Curry, who was working with Microsoft at the time, they open sourced the markup language, and then Scott Curry ran with it to create his own company. He has a commercial product as well as a free product for working with BIML. I'm demonstrating the free product. Okay, so BIML, the important thing, you have the root node, BIML, and then you have what's called the namespace declaration. That's saying what structure is being used. And everything in BIML is going to be have a plurals and things within those plurals. So we've got packages, and then we've got a list of packages. So I've got packages. This is the node that goes all the way down. Oh, no, I can't go that far. Sorry, it's too far to go. But down below, there's the packages node will be closed out, and there will be one or more package normally. So the package, I have to give it a name. I always put in the protection level. How many have been bit by protection level issues? And that's okay. If you're running, depending on how you deploy your packages, it's very common to get bit by protection level. With BIML, the default, one of the beauties of BIML is it's going to have a whole bunch of defaults available. And the default is don't save sensitive, which means that any passwords that are added to this file will be thrown out. Okay. So, but the problem is that in SSIS 2012 and later, not only do packages have protection level, but now the project has a protection level. And if they conflict, you get an error. And so by default, it has encrypt sensitive with user key, which means that if I edit the package, I can see any of the sensitive information. If I hand the same package over to somebody else, they can't see it. It's gone. So I have to make sure that I use the same protection level. So I put that in. And there may be a few other things that I put in. If I don't need them, I don't put them in. And then a package has tasks. It has variables, it has connections, and it has tasks. And tasks, one of the tasks is a data flow. I can also put in, I have a list. Let me just go down a little bit. Okay. So I've got different kinds of tasks. Almost all of these tasks correspond to standard SSIS tasks. So if you know what you're wanting to do, you just find the appropriate tasks. Execute SQL, probably one of the most used tasks that you have. Okay. But in this case, all I have is a data flow. I'm going to read this. And then I have within a data, and my data flow has a name, and then I have transforms, okay? And this first one is a very long one. So I have a flat file source. Again, I could have an OLADB source or an ADO.NET source, different kinds of sources. Has a name, and then I have the name of a connection, which we'll talk about in a minute. And then I have a list of columns. And what I've done, by the way, I don't have to put the columns in. If I leave out the columns at this point, BIML will just create a column for each of the columns that's in my whatever the source is. And the reason I put this in is to handle this case. We come to where I have where it is used is false. That's what unchecks the column. Okay. And let's see, we go all. This is long. Unfortunately, I'm not. I won't show you all of this. I'll go down to the end. These are my delimiters, okay? Now, the thing is, so, I mean, this is, I almost hate looking at this because there's so much to it. When I come back out and look at it for the BIMLScript, you'll see how much simpler it is, okay? So I have all my This is my flat file format that's defining the format of each of those flat files. Okay. I have the connections, which is going to say what format do I use, what file do I use with that. Okay. So anything about the BIML that you have a question about before we look at the BIMLScript? Yes.
You said it would automatically generate the columns if you didn't put them in. Can you do that, have it automatically generate and will it generate the BIML in reverse? Can you go back and modify it false without writing them all out?
Okay. So the question is, the BIML can read the columns from the file, and it will generate a mapping then for all of them. Can I start from, say, an SSIS package and generate the BIML that would have those marked up? Yes. So it's improving. I found one thing that it missed, and it was and I'll show you that. I'll point that out when we get to it. But yes, it can generate that. Now, this point, I haven't tested this. I didn't. When we're done, I'll come back and look at that, because I'm pretty sure that will get caught. Okay. Any other questions before? Okay. Now I'm not very good with copyright, so I thought about getting putting a picture of some of the roller coasters that have loops, because a lot of what we're going to use that generates all of these columns are code loops. So let me hide the preview real quick. Before I look at that, I just wanted to show you these include files. What this is going to do, this section here, the less than, pound sign, @ sign, that's a directive that is used you're going to put some kind of a code directive. In this case, you're putting in an include to say, take a file, whatever's in that file, and put it right in this space. So everything from there to there, it's going to take that file and just insert it, just as is. And all that file is a okay, it has some variables. While I'm here, and I always forget to mention this, this is the beginning of a code block. So we're going to put some programming code, normally C#, but you can put VB. And so the less than pound sign, and then the pound sign greater than, that whole section is just code. I can put anything I want into that section that's valid code. And what I've done is I've declared my variables, my package name, and I will use that variable in the rest of my BIMLScript. Okay, I have the tab name, I have my data file name, and each of those files that have param at the end, they have the similar structure. They just use a different package name, tab name, etc. But then I come to my loops, and we'll start with this loop. This is my transformation, which is actually one of the more complex. And you see I start a block here that has my, this is my start of my code, and there's the end of my code. I actually start code in here, and I think it ends over at the end there. I start another code block here. Sorry, it's a little bit long. But what this will do, it will just run this code, and I have a loop in here. It's probably easier to work with. I have a loop which has a for each, and I have a collection of rows, and I use the data row. Oops. Sorry. I use the data row to is going to have for each item that's in whatever in my metadata table, it is going to give me a row, and it's going to get the values from that. And then I just get the columns from that. In this case, I only get the column name. In others, I get the length, the start position, the end position. I get the data type, etc. What I do here, I have two tables. I have my metadata table, which is describing that, that fixed width file, and I have my out file data table, which is describing the CSV that I create at the end. And I put this in. By the way, how many work with .NET much? Okay, not very many. I subtitled this presentation at one of the SQL Saturdays as how I came to love documentation. I also could have said how I came to love code, but I'm a developer at heart, so this was very comfortable. This is a method on a data table, and all it's doing is applying a filter to that data table. So, I use this pattern here, this little section here where I have the curly brace and 0. That's a placeholder, and I'll take that value from whatever's in that variable, put it in. So it's basically giving me where column equals blank, whatever that name is. And what this will do then is returns a variable, a collection, and that collection is either is going to have values. It has a count of 0. If it has no values, it has more than 1. And that is what I use to decide whether or not I want to show this column. If the column isn't in this table, if I have a column that's in this table, I want to set my is used to false. If the column is in the table, I want to set it to is used equal to true. Okay, so I have my test. If I start another section of code, let's go back to here. I've got the code here, and it goes to right about here. So this whole section is my code. It just tests to see, is the target, do I have columns there? Are there rows? Did it find it? If so, set the is used equal to true and set the target column equal to whatever that name is. One other thing I need to introduce, I forgot. This construction here, where I have my, it has less than pound equal to, and then at the end you have pound greater than. That's going to insert whatever the value is into that spot. I'm not sure, not as many people have done this in the past, but if you're using a language like PHP or classic ASP.NET, this would be a familiar structure. You have code that runs, and then it puts in a value into the proper place. And that's exactly what that's doing. Okay. And so this is going to then iterate through all of the columns and creates that whole long list of column nodes, that have this structure, and it sets either the is used to true or is used equals false. Okay. Any questions about this before I go on? Okay. One thing I didn't point out, there it is, okay. My for loop, for each loop, it has a starting place. This is the start of this whole block. The completion of that whole block is actually down below, and I automatically put this in, and that closes out the block. And one of the things that I find is that I put that in the wrong place all the time, and things blow up. So nothing bad. It just usually just errors out. So I have that whole thing is in C#. It's one whole. It's one block that's going to execute. It's going to go for each item in that table. It's going to do something. Then it's going to, when it gets to that point, it starts over again. And what it's doing is outputting XML. So it's outputting this column, it's outputting all of these attributes, etc. And this pattern is probably one of the kind of the keystones for working with BIML. You might get a list of all of the tables that are in a database, and you would create one package for each table, to do something. Frequently you'll have two databases. You're copying data from one database to the second one. You go and you get a list of all of the tables, create one package for each table that is going to just be a simple data flow to push it in from one table to another. Okay, so loops are your friend. So, okay. Any questions before I go? Okay. I'm going to do one other. I do the same thing for my flat file format. And the one thing I wanted to point out, you had asked about generating BIML from a file. One of the things I found that it doesn't catch is this is Unicode equals false. It just automatically, it leaves it out, doesn't do it. So when I first generated the package, so I started by creating a package and then reversing it, and what I ended up with, it looked like Chinese. Some kind of a character, the Asian style. It was, really quite interesting because it was treating it as Unicode and it wasn't. So that was one thing that didn't work. Okay, excuse me, just before I go on, I need to do something. Unfortunately, I can't do it ahead of time, and I can't wait until I'm needing to do it. I'll explain what I'm doing in a moment. So with this loop, I do the same thing, except for I'm getting more information because I'm going to generate all of the, each of the columns that are in that file. Okay, so it generates that. The code is going to be up on the website, so if you want to dig into it, you can take a look at it, and if you have questions, you can ask. Same thing. Okay, one thing I forgot when I first did this is I need to make sure that I handle that end of line character. So I just had to make sure that I had one column that was dedicated to my final character. I did something a little different with the delimited file. Rather than using for each, I used what's called a for loop. So I have I'm getting a number and going up to the number of rows. So this is a count of all of the rows related to this. And I just needed to I needed to know that because I needed to know what the last column was. Okay. And so I get all of the information. I create this. It'll look a little bit different. Okay, I won't look at it much detail. The one thing I had to change was my delimiter. If I was on the last row, then I wanted to put LF as a value. If it was any other row, I wanted to put comma, because for some reason, and I'm not sure, it makes it easier for the people who created SSIS, to program it, but for some reason they just put the delimiter on that last column as always the line, whatever your end of line character is. So that's the one thing I did here that's different than with my fixed width. Okay. So any questions about this before we go to the front matter? How we, okay. Well, let's go back to the beginning. I wanted to show you that first because I think that's where the most of the work is done. But before I can do the work, I need to have get some values. I need to get the values out of the worksheets. I have to mainly get the values out of the worksheet and my variables. Okay, this section at the top, the import, where I have the less than pound @ sign, that is basically a convenience so that I can work with, I don't have to spell out my classes. It's the same as I think using in C# and imports in VB.NET. Okay, then I've pointed out my include file here. I've hard-coded my output tab because I don't change that, and I also, the out file, I just use the same file each time. These two, this section, anybody like working with Excel and SSIS a lot? Okay, I hate it. Okay, basically what I found when I ran this on my home computer, I had a certain version of Excel, the Excel driver installed. So I'd have to set it to that version, and I'd have to point to the appropriate Excel file. On this computer, I finally gave up and just went and created, downloaded the JET drivers, which will work with Excel 97. So if you want to try these on different versions of Excel, you can, whatever will work with your SSIS version, you can try. These are the connection strings. Then I have a query template. One of the things that's very nice about Excel is that you can write just a simple select statement to get data out of your Excel spreadsheet. And so that's what I've done. And it has the same format. And again, I have a placeholder, that curly brace 0, curly brace, that's my placeholder. And you put a $sign for some reason, that gives you the tab. And this is going to be a query that I can use. Once I fill in the name of the tab, fill in it to that spot. Okay, and I generate my connection by taking the connection template, which is based on what version of Excel you have, and then put the name of the metadata file that you use. Your metadata query is just take the tab where I have that metadata, which is these are the tabs that all have metadata. Plug it into those spots, and I do the same with my out tab. Now, everything I've done so far, except for the mixing of the XML and the C#, everything I've done to this point has been standard C#. This part comes from the BIMLScript itself, and that's the external data. There are several methods. This is a class, and one of the methods, important methods that they have, is the get data table. And the nice thing about this is I pass in a connection string and a query that's valid for that connection string, and it will run it. So I'm passing in a connection string to my Excel, and I'm passing in a valid Excel query, and it's going to then run that query, and it returns a data table. If I had a connection string for SQL and had a valid SQL query, it would return a data table. It'd be identical. So if you decided to use SQL rather than Excel, it'd be very easy to change this. Okay. So any questions about this so far? I think that's all I have with my BIML.
Can you show like one or two of the include BIML files for the Excel source file?
Okay. So question was asking if I could show some of the include files for the Excel. Let me start just with this. This is simple. And I don't think this is necessary. Going the wrong way. What you want. That would just have my metadata file name. And then I have, let's see, which one is this? XLSX. Okay, go to my JET. So I have provider, template. Okay, I put this in because you have to have a quotation, or I need the double quotes to work. This is my placeholder. That will be where I put my file. And then at the end, I have extended properties. This is the old style. You know, I think the extended properties for the others include XML is the format. I forget what all it has. Okay, and each of them will be similar. And I always set the IMAX equal to 1, just to so it doesn't do any sampling.
I didn't know if there was any more than that, but thank you.
Yeah, it is. Okay, the comment, no, I didn't know if there's more than that. Yeah, it's just very simple. It's just that I was changing this so many times and sometimes changing on the fly, and I thought, okay, let's put it all in one place. Okay. So, let me go back. Okay. I guess I'll go back. I might end up doing. This happened to me. Let me just see if I can get this to work. See what my no. I was hoping this would start. I have a backup if it doesn't work. This is so. When I first had this idea for this talk, I thought about starting from starting with SSIS 2008 R2 and kind of walking through the process, and then I realized that the amount of work I'd have to do to try to get all of those versions working was a challenge, and I realized, there's a much better way to demonstrate the use of metadata, and that was to use the Azure Data Flow. Let me find this. Okay, so I've looked at this. One of the things I found, so Azure Data Factory data flows. This is a tool that Microsoft added, it came out public, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure exactly when. And it's a tool that's very similar, fills in a gap with SS that Azure Data Flow had with working with compared to SSIS. But one of the things I found, you create what's called a data set, and that's going to be like your source, or it could be your destination. One of the things I found is there were no fixed width data sets. There were delimited data sets. There were Parquet, ORC, there was even JSON. I don't think there's an XML data set. Okay, my thought was, okay, could I create something that would be very similar to that using metadata? And so that's what I was going to show you now. By the way, I think, let me double check. Okay, I'll have to look for my results. So I went out to, sorry, this did this to me last week, and so I've been challenged. Okay, what are we doing? Okay, I think I know what my problem is then. Sorry. Let me do something real quick. Make a quick change. I was hoping to have this set up, and apparently I lost my connection. Because I have, using my work computer, I need to go back out. Okay. So that I've logged into my Azure Data Factory, okay, and this is the tool. And a lot of the older models, you use copy data. You copy the data into your, oh, wait, sorry. Let me start this, okay. There, go back, okay. This takes the best of days, it takes 5 minutes. So I always have to remember to start it before I get going. So in the past, you had copy data. You would copy it to whatever, it could be your Azure Data Lake, or it could be you copied it to SQL Server, and then you would run stored procedures on it to make whatever changes. And what they did is they added data flow, which allows you to change the data in process. And one of the talks explained it, that basically it's going to take the data flow and pass it on to an Azure Databricks, which will then process the data and do whatever it needed to do. Okay, so I've got some data flows, but let's start with a data set. I had 2 data sets, and the data sets would be your data sources that you're going to use for processing. And what I did is I created a data set for my data file that was a delimited text, but what I did is I set my column delimiter to no delimiter. Okay. So now I have each row is going to be its own. It's going to have one column in it. A couple other things I had to do. I had to set the encoding to UTF-8. So it's going to treat the data as kind of a semi-Unicode. Then I created a second structure for my data structure, and I put up a CSV file. I just saved the tab as a CSV file and pushed it up to Azure Data Lake. and it has a comma delimited. And when I look at it, I have a schema. You can see the multiple columns that I have, my column name, description, length, etc. Okay, then what I do, I created a data flow. And I have multiple versions of this. We'll look at this. This is the final version I made. And the flow for this is I'm going to start with my, let me get a little bit of space here. I'll start with my source. That's that single column right there. I add a column that I'm going to use to join to my metadata. This is my metadata that I bring in. And what I do is I pivot it. Okay, so now rather than having one row for each column, I have one row, period. Okay, we'll look at what that looks like in just a minute. Okay, then I join the two together. And then this is what does the work. I call it dynamic parse, and I'll show you what I have done with that. Okay, then I remove columns, and then I output it to the file. So let's start with the metadata. Oops. That's a little bit of an annoying. These are some of the settings for that. I say, where am I getting it? I have my projection. I can choose what data, what format I want this to be in. Sorry, what data types I want them to be in. One of the interesting things that's not available in SSIS is I can specify a format. So if I have an integer and it's in a certain format, I can put that into this logic. Okay, see if I can get, there it is. Oh, it's ready. Okay, good. I was panicked that it wouldn't work. Okay. Let me expand this. There we go. Expand it out. I'll come back to this join column in just a moment. So come to the pivot. And the reason I had a join column, and all it is just a constant 1, is that the pivot requires a group by column. I tried leaving it out entirely. It complained. I had to have one column to group by it, so I just put the number 1 in every row, and it groups by that. And then I have the pivot key. This is what drives my column, and I just take my column name, okay. And then finally, I have my pivoted column. If any of you worked with pivot statements in SQL or SSIS? Okay. One of the things that you can't do nicely in either of those is to pivot multiple columns. Okay. One of the things you can do with Azure data flow is you can pivot multiple columns. So what I have here is I have my length and my start, and like pretty well any pivoting tool, you have to have some kind of an aggregate. I just picked average. I could have picked min, max. I think, I don't know which would be faster. I just randomly picked one. And then you have your column name pattern. And what this is going to do, the prefix is going to be, let's see, the prefix is going to be this expression here. So the prefix is going to be length and start pos with an underscore. The middle is going to be the key. It's going to be whatever is in that column here. And then the pivot, finally, suffix has nothing. I could put something if I need to. Now what I'll do is look at the preview of this. I'd click on Data Preview and refresh. Now what I had to do this, I had to click this, had to set up the data flow debug. And what that does is that starts a Spark cluster in the background, and I'm starting to pay some money. It's not a lot of money, but I'm starting to pay money for using this. If I'm just designing, it's okay. As soon as I get a cluster going, I'm paying, I think I may pay 20 cents, maybe 50 cents today on this process. But it takes about 5 minutes to run. Okay. So you can see now I've got my join column. You can see length of filler 1 is 2, length of filler 2 is 2, and I go all the way across to here. And you can see each of the columns and their value. You can see the start positions of each of the columns. Okay, so that's my, that is my metadata. Okay, I have my data column, data file. This is the data set I showed you. I added the join column. I think it's necessary. I'm not certain if it's necessary or not. I put it in to handle what this join here, because normally you have to have a join. The join has several options. I can do a full outer join, an inner join, outer join, right outer join, or a cross join. I tried doing an inner join and it protested because I think it decided that I was trying to do too many rows. Sorry. So, so I chose the cross join, and then I have a condition. And this is the condition. It's going to match the add join column main, the join column, and it's testing to see, excuse me just a moment. It's going to test to see if they're equal. And I tried leaving it out, and it didn't like that, so I just put this condition in, and it worked. Both of those are a constant of 1, so it was very easy. Okay, and I can exit this and pull this down. Okay, and then finally, this is my dynamic parse. This was a bear to get completely ready. This is a little more complex parse than I normally have done. I can take and I create a column that's based on some value, that's based on an expression. What I'm trying to do is to get the column name into this, okay? And so what I had to do is I did a test to see, it's going to say, look for this particular column, one that matches that name, and then it's going to create a column that takes a parameter. So I've got a parameter called, that's called column 1 name, and it gets the value out of that. And what I found is that if I left off if I didn't have a function there, it didn't work. So I had to put some function to get that value. So, so in that parameter, column 1 name has whatever name I put into that value. Then I have my expression, and this expression is basically repeated. Let me get rid of these just so that there's a little more room. And this is going to just do a substring, very simple. And it's going to get that column, whatever column name I have in there. So I have in here, I forget which column I have in that particular variable, but one of the columns that I have, I put the column 1 start, and then I have the column 1 length. And the by name is then going to get the column based on that, whatever is in that parameter. You can't use any kind of an expression in this by name. This has to be either a constant or a parameter. So I finally put this in like this. Okay. And then I convert it to integer. And so what this does is just take the data column, takes the integer that's in that, that's in the column 1 start, and then does the same. That gets the start position, then gets the length, and it generates a value. So let's see what this looks like. I have to hit refresh, and it'll take a minute. But so what I've got, I use a parameter. I need to let this run, but I use a parameter that I can set. And I could set that parameter based on an array, or I could possibly read a file and populate, say these are the columns that I want to get, and it would then output that. So any questions about what I've got so far? Oh, okay. And again, this seems to take a long time, and somebody explained to me that part of the reason is that it takes it's building up a structure that takes a long time. I think it builds some kind of a VM to run, and the amount of time it takes to build that is it takes a long time. If I were running this against, let's say, a terabyte of data, it would come out much faster than if it were running on my local machine. But when it's trying to run it against this size data, okay, this has all of my value. Let's see if I can get to the end. Nope. See if I can trying to find the scroll bar. There it is. I go way to the end. Okay, I think I picked the wrong task to look at because I need to get rid of all of these. There we are. So it parsed out these 3 columns. The name it got from the parameter, the start position, and the length it got from those parameters. So it's a start. I think the next project is to see if I can expand this and see if it runs faster. So, okay, let me bring this back up and then we'll close out. Okay, so these are some resources. If you're interested in BIML, these are the resources you can look at. And again, I'll have these up in a second. And be sure and fill out an evaluation. And I do thank you for coming, and for those who are listening online, thank you for listening.